Thank you for downloading from Ravi Zacharias International Ministries. Support for this podcast comes from your generous gifts and donations. You can find out more about Ravi Zacharias and the team at www.rzim.org.
Hello friends, this is Ravi Zacharias. You know, a recent survey revealed a very high percentage, nearly 70% of all college students might well walk away from the Christian faith by the time they graduate. That's a daunting statistic. Our goal is to reach them early in high school and university with the message of the gospel. We are committed to training young believers to better understand their faith so that they are equipped to present it and to defend it. The opportunities are there, and the challenge is before us. Will you partner with us? Your gifts will help us hold conferences such as Reboot, Refresh, and Remind. These conferences are geared towards high school and college students as well as young professionals. We are really excited about all that God has in store for this ministry with our growing team. We hope you will join others in supporting our efforts by donating online at RZIM.org. And thank you for doing that. The average now is 130 to 160,000 a year. Did you know that? They're being martyred at the rate of over 200 every day, which means approximately 5 a minute. Somewhere in this world, a Christian is being killed for his or her faith.
Welcome to Just Thinking with Ravi Zacharias. Taking a stand for God means inviting the scorn and ridicule of popular culture, but others have faced the same persecution as well. When faced with that same kind of martyrdom Ravi mentioned, scorn and ridicule seem pretty minor, but sadly all three are a reality for many following Christ. How did Nehemiah of the Old Testament handle the persecution? That's where we pick up today with part 3 of Ravi's message titled, Scorned for God. Here's Ravi.
The second thing they faced force. I tell you today that we are living at a time in world history where you may not be aware that there is more martyrdom going on amongst Christians than ever before in history. In the year 2001, David Barrett and Todd Johnson wrote a massive book called World Trends between AD 30 and AD 2000. Is what 2200 is what they wrote. And here's what they said. Up from the AD 35 to AD 2000, there were 70 million Christians killed for their faith, of which 45 million of them were killed in the 20th century. 45 million in the century which empiricists told us was going to usher in the utopian time because science had conquered space and so much more was known. When we killed more people, one another, and out of Christians, 45 million. Do you know the present rate that Barrett and Johnston predicted is exceeding what they said? They predicted something like 100,000 Christians a year will be killed by this time, 2010, 2011, 2012. And the average now is 130 to 160,000 a year. Did you know that? They're being martyred at the rate of over 200 every day, which means approximately 5 a minute. Somewhere in this world, a Christian is being killed for his or her faith. You know, it is amazing when a rankly liberal instrument decides to cover something like that. And I'm looking at Newsweek magazine of February 12th, and in a lead article by the famed Somalian writer who's an atheist, Ayaan Hirsi Ali. She actually was a former Muslim who became an atheist. If you've not read her books, you ought to pick those books up. She's brilliant in what she says. And you can't see this from a distance. My colleague Kryn and I have been in this very church where they are showing coffins lined up in a slum area outside of Cairo, when not too long ago, so many of them were just blown to bits. And there are thousands of Christians in this auditorium, this church now, carved into a rock, memorializing these lives. And Ayaan Hirsi Ali, allow me to do this, please, begins her article by saying, We hear so often about Muslims as being victims of abuse in the West and combatants in the Arab Spring's fight against tyranny. But in fact, a wholly different kind of war is underway, an unrecognized battle costing thousands of lives. Christians are being killed in the Islamic world because of their religion. It is a rising genocide that ought to provoke global alarm. She's not a Christian. And then she goes on to say this: from blasphemy laws to brutal murders to bombings to mutilations and the burning of holy sites, Christians in so many nations live in fear. In Nigeria, many have suffered all these forms of persecution. She goes on to give the statistics. In the month of January 2012 alone, Boko Haram was responsible for 54 deaths. In 2011, its members killed at least 510 people and burned down or destroyed more than 350 churches in 10 states. They use guns, gasolines, bombs, even machetes, shouting Allahu Akbar, God is great, while launching attacks on unsuspecting citizens. They have attacked churches. A Christmas Day gathering of 42 Catholics were killed, a town hall, beauty salons, and banks. They have so far focused on killing Christian clerics, politicians, students, policemen, and soldiers, as well as Muslim clerics who condemned their mayhem. While they started out by using crude materials like hit-and-run assassinations from the back of motorbikes in 2009, the latest Associated poll reports indicate that the group's recent attacks show a new level of potency and sophistication. And if I remember, her last paragraph was quite worth reading. Instead of falling for overblown tales of Western Islamophobia, let's take a real stand against the Christophobia infecting the Muslim world today. Tolerance is for everyone except the intolerant. Pretty tough language for Newsweek. You know, in the early days of my ministry, I was doing work in Vietnam and Cambodia and all of that during the war. And in 1974, I stopped by in Bangkok for one night en route to Phnom Penh. And they gave me a layover because there was no flight available that night. It was in the days where airlines were kind to you, and you did sit down and enjoy a nice feeling that you were needed. And so they would put you up in a hotel overnight. And as I was walking out of there, one of my friends standing at the door, greeted me. I was shocked. He was a classmate of mine, named Koos Fiji. He was about a 6'5", tall, lanky Dutchman. He and I did our undergraduate in theology together in Toronto. I said, Koos, what are you doing here? He said, you thought you'd go through without letting me know, didn't you? Well, somebody had let him know. I had a hotel room given for the night. We had 2 twin beds there. I lay on my bed, he lay on his. He put his hands behind his back and through the night talked to me about his fears. And one of his fears was that he would pay with his life someday. I said, Koos, don't talk like this, you know. It's a peaceful setting here. You'll be okay. He said, no, my friend. He said, things happen here very suddenly. I won't go into details. Time has run out. But I think it was in 1981 or so, I remember getting a letter with a white envelope and a black border from Overseas Missionary Fellowship, OMF. And when I opened it, there was a picture of Koos and a border in memoriam. He was speaking at a church in a little town, and he'd finished speaking. He was a very strong man physically, but even stronger in his convictions. As he walked, actually it was a prayer meeting, and as he was walking to a prayer meeting, a man waiting for him with a gun, point blank, 7 bullets into his face and killed him. You know, for the first time it hit me that I would sit in class next to a martyr in the making. And things don't change very much. History is replete with that. Scorn, force, and lastly, scheming. I'll only take a minute to talk about this. You know, you can take a lot of challenges. You can take a lot of attacks. And I face it all the time. I get used to it. Many of the hate letters I get, actually, after reading 2 lines, I just rip it up and toss it in. I remember critiquing or commenting on the book not too long ago, written by a famous person here on why he was not sure if hell existed at all. And the book was called Love Wins. So I critiqued it and wrote, and somebody wrote me a totally angry letter for disagreeing with the book. I was so tempted to write back, dear friend, evidently love does not win. Kind of stuff you get in the mail. I tell you what, none of my teammates have been spared. You get this kind. We get used to the flack from those on the other side of it when you get shot at from the back. You know, one of the former Atlanta Falcons kickers, Jason Elam, once told me, he said, you know what, Ravi? You expect to be booed on the opponent's turf. When you're booed on your own turf, it's very hard to take. The scheming that goes on. Shemaiah and Noadiah tried to trap Nehemiah and set him up so that they could destroy him. They didn't succeed.
We have to end today's program there, but tune in tomorrow for the continuation of this message titled Scorned for God. To purchase this message or others, be sure to call us at 1-800-448-6766. You can also order any of our resources online at rzim.org or rzim.ca for those listening in Canada.
It is said that a lady once wrote to the famed mystic writer A.W. Tozer and thanked him for his Christian journal, saying it perfectly fit her birdcage. One critic said of Stephen Hawking's famed book, A Brief History of Time, which shattered all records on the bestseller list in the United Kingdom, that it would be the most bought and least read book in recent memory. And yet, who of you has not entered another world or gained a life-changing insight just from reading a book? I am absolutely convinced that the books you and I read possibly help mold our lives more purposefully and eternally, I might add, than we ever realize. As King Solomon once said, of making many books there is no end, but finding of wisdom preserves the life of its possessor. For that, only the book of all books, the Bible, has the answer.
From July 24th to July 27th, Refresh, Ready for College, is back for its second year at the Zacharias Institute in Atlanta, Georgia. As students, you know what it's like to be surrounded by questions. Questions about the world, questions about how to live, questions about faith. It can be easy to feel overwhelmed. How can you keep your faith strong? And how can you answer the questions and objections of your friends and classmates? At Refresh, no question is off limits. In fact, we're excited to hear your questions, and we believe asking them and wrestling through them is part of what it means to pursue a strong relationship with God. We want to give you the space to think through some of the toughest challenges to Christianity so that you can be equipped to live out your faith at high school and on your college campus. This year's program will be packed with high-energy talks from Ravi Zacharias and the RZIM Global Speaking Team, dealing with today's biggest challenges to Christianity. We'll have Q&A sessions every day where we tackle your hardest questions, breakout groups to discuss these issues with your peers, and daily worship and Bible teaching. It's going to be both faith-strengthening and a lot of fun. So if you're a student in high school or headed to college, don't miss this important week. Register now at rzim.org/refresh, and we'll see you at the Zacharias Institute on July 24th.
To find out more about this event or to partner with us as we strive to reach the younger generation, be sure to call us or visit our website. Just Thinking is a listener-supported radio ministry and is furnished by Ravi Zacharias International Ministries, Atlanta, Georgia.